The Air India 171 crash was the very first loss of the Boeing 787 model since Boeing started selling the aircraft in 2010. The latest from the preliminary investigation shows that it could have been fuel contamination, sabotage by the pilot, or a software glitch that commanded engine shutdown. I will cover fuel contamination first, sabotage second, and the software glitch third. It happened previously 5 years ago. Commendations and accolades have to be given to both pilots for maintaining control of the aircraft all the way to the ground. They did everything they could to minimize loss of life. Airline pilots do not practice dual engine failures in twin engine aircraft in simulators, only single engine failures. We do discuss dual engine failures in class. There is a long history of fuel contamination that goes back many years, 75 years to be exact. Some of the causes in the past have been the result of water in the fuel tanks, improper maintenance, contaminated fuel filters, fuel contaminated with microbial growth. Believe it or not, creatures can actually grow inside the fuel if it's not treated correctly. Other examples are good fuel that was altered after it was placed inside a storage facility and jet fuel loaded into an avgas system. The chart above shows over the last 75 years the increase in fuel contamination accidents that have occurred over time. There was one in the 1950s, one in the 1960s, none in the 1970s, two in the 1980s, two in the 1990s, one in the 2000s, two in the 2010s, and four in the 2020s. Part of any small airplane pilot's pre-flight procedure is to always check for fuel contamination. Since water is heavier than fuel, the fuel contamination port to check for it will always be at the lowest point in the fuel system. Let's examine what water looks like. In the illustrated picture above, air is at the top of the container, fuel is beneath it, indicated by the green arrow. Inside the fuel are microorganisms. They appear to make the fuel slightly opaque and not clear. And at the bottom is the water. When water is discovered, you continue draining until you don't see any more. Something a lot of people may not know is that airline pilots are not required nor trained to check for fuel contamination. Instead, ground personnel are trained to check for it. The storage facilities are also checked. While not related, I thought you'd like this. Jet fuel coming out of a water faucet on an aircraft carrier. If it was fuel contamination, some people might ask, how is it that engines could fail many minutes after they were started? Well, I'll tell you. No aircraft, piston or jet, has its fuel intakes at the very bottom of the fuel system. If they did, the contamination would immediately enter the fuel system and proceed to the engines. For this reason, the fuel intakes are actually located a little bit above where the contamination is normally found. While that is good, it also presents a serious problem if the fuel has not been checked for contamination. Because of the inherent design of fuel tanks, the water will not enter the fuel intakes until after the aircraft has rotated and started to climb. That is a terrible time to find out that you have fuel contamination. Unfortunately, since there are not any electronic indicators or detectors to tell pilots about the fuel contamination, they just won't know until after they have lifted off and start to climb out. The second possibility that has recently come out is sabotage by the pilot. The Indian government is under overwhelming pressure to provide information because of the amount of lives that were lost. Information that is brought out prior to the completion of the investigation does no service to the families or the public at large. Quite recently, some CVR cockpit voice recorder information was released where the co-pilot who was flying and doing the takeoff questioned the captain and asked him why he had shut off the fuel switches, and the captain's reply was that he had not. The problem with obtaining such a small piece of information without having all the other data provided is that it can lead people to making false and erroneous conclusions. The court of public opinion is very brutal, and now in the age of social media, even more so. Countless aviation experts and YouTube influencers have given their professional opinions regarding the cause of the crash, and they have had to retract those opinions. How many times have you received a text on your phone or an email that you interpreted one way, but it was sent with a different meaning intended, but you didn't have all the information at your disposal before you drew your own conclusion? If one of the pilots really wanted to die and kill everyone, then why would there already be evidence that both pilots were working collaboratively in trying to start both engines? One engine had already been started and was spooling up, but there just wasn't enough time. Many years ago, an Egyptian air pilot was found to have committed suicide by cutting off both fuel switches while a 767 was in cruise. But in that case, the co-pilot did not assist the captain in restarting the engines, and they had a lot more time. They were at cruise. More disturbing, the Egyptian government refused to accept the accident report by the United States investigators, and as a result, they hired their own investigators who drew up a completely different set of conclusions as to the cause of the accident, and that it was impossible that the co-pilot deliberately caused the aircraft to crash. This was in spite of overwhelming evidence. The co-pilot had been reprimanded by the chief pilot. The chief pilot was in the back of the same plane. The co-pilot was nearing retirement. The co-pilot's financial situation was dire, and so was his personal life. Like I mentioned previously, the captain was assisting the co-pilot in trying to save the aircraft. This brings up the third possibility, that the engines were shut down by a software glitch in the aircraft. This is not the first time it happened. It happened to ANA Airlines 5 years ago and without pilot input at all. It was a software glitch. And why didn't we hear about it? Well, I'll tell you. It happened on the ground and not in the air. If you liked this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Over 70% of my viewers don't. Stay curious and stay safe.